Welcome back to the class, everyone. When it comes to getting all the right stats on your characters in Galaxy of Heroes, it can be a little bit challenging when you're trying to juggle all the right sets and having to have the right primaries along with all the right secondaries. So what I want to do in today's video is offer an alternative method that might not be very orthodox, but could be very helpful in modding some of your more important characters. So before we get into the actual method along with the characters that can really benefit from it, we really do need to define what mod sets look like in general before we get there. So mod sets, as a quick reminder, are the actual image that you can see on the mod when you're applying them to your characters. And what's more important that we're going to be talking about today is actually the set bonuses that go along with them. So basically the two main methods of applying sets to characters is either apply one set of 4, like speed, offense, or crit damage, and then have an accompanying set of 2, like health, defense, potency, tenacity, or crit chance. That is one method. The other method is just to go all out, like we did with here with Sith the Eternal Emperor, where we just gave him 3 health sets. Another example of this would be Afra, who also gets 3 potency sets. Now, the alternative method to these two options is going to, like I said in the very beginning of the video, be a little unorthodox, and many of you actually might even be doing this intentionally or unintentionally, but I wanted to shine some light on it because it can actually be really helpful when you're trying to hit specific goals for characters. So this is ultimately going to revolve around using broken sets. Now, a broken set is just this, where you have a character like Armor who really wants to focus on being as fast as possible and really doesn't care about that much else, where you're going to apply a speed set to her of those 4 mods. Of course, she always needs them. But when it comes to her secondary set, you just completely abandon trying to have a health or a defense, a potency or tenacity build up, and you end up with a pretty cool conclusion, because while she doesn't necessarily need the health or the defense, this oddball defense primary offense set with 26 speed actually gets to have a really cool home where it's not necessarily being wasted, because while the primary and the secondary and really the set all don't really match up well, Armor is able to utilize the 26 speed, and she's really not losing any speed on it because we're able to still maintain our speed set there. And then again, accompanying with another oddball mod here, health with tenacity, which obviously for a character that genuinely wants tenacity, probably wants the tenacity set along with a tenacity primary. So not only is Armor getting to make good use of these mods that hit a lot of speed, but she's also not really sacrificing anything, because as a support character, she really just wants to go as soon as she can at the beginning of the match and then also take subsequent turns. Now, the rest of the characters in this list are really not meant to be an exhaustive list, but I'm just trying to give more examples of this exact thing. Thrawn is another good example, or at least he was way back when he would go first and he could swap turn to any character on the fields. That was very important because he could essentially make any slow character a very fast character. This is still relevant somewhat in the current game, but I just wanted to use him as another example where you can see that we are doing the exact same thing. You will notice that we do not have 2 set bonuses here at the bottom, rather only the speed bonus, because we have this really awkward tenacity mod with protection primary, as well as a potency mod with no potency secondaries. So again, leveraging these kind of oddball mods that have really good speed secondaries in order to get Thrawn as fast as we possibly can to do what he needs to do. This example continues on in Hoda, who for me, Hoda's really only job is either with JML to take as many turns, stay in stealth, doesn't necessarily need to survive, call attacks out of turn because he himself can't do damage, so crit chance wouldn't be something very helpful for him. And then also with Jedi Knight Luke, I just really need him to take a turn in the very beginning to be able to go before my enemies. So what his other offset is doesn't really matter. He can't use crit chance, but quite frankly, having crit chance in general on a non-crit chance or offense or crit damage mod doesn't even make that much sense to begin with, especially when it doesn't even have an offense secondary. So again, another character who's able to leverage the speed on this mod without necessarily having to combine a second set. The tenacity protection with no tenacity secondary is doing the exact same thing. The same can be said about Resistance Hero Finn, who really just wants to take one turn in the beginning to be able to get ahead and get that turn meter train going for the Finn Zori team. Again, very oddball mod here with offense primary and crit chance secondary, as well as just a normal health mod that isn't necessarily doing anything very special. As our last example, we have Wat Tambor, who all of you probably know this. He gains a bonus turn in the very beginning of the battle, and then he also is just naturally fast. While that won't work for every single comp out there, for a lot of the really important GL matchups that he's a part of, like with Seer SLKR, really the first turn alone is the only one that matters. And then I guess if you can get extra tech out with his speed set, that's also great. But again, looking at these mods, they aren't really doing anything special outside of the actual matchup. Another crit chance primary who unfortunately just aren't really seeing much use outside of this exact niche use, because if you typically want damage on a character, you have a crit damage triangle to begin with. Now, the other area that I want to look at that I don't think is talked about nearly as much is actually going to be broken offense, or rather a character utilizing offense and then having a broken set on top of it. Fennec is probably one of the best examples of this. I think I've had a broken set on her for a long time, and there's actually more than one reason for it. So very similar to the speed mules that we looked at previously, where we didn't really care about any other stat because we just want them to go as soon as they can in the beginning of the battle to trigger various effects. These attackers are kind of in the same way that we really just need them to deal as much damage as possible, and we're not really concerned with them having to tank or having a support function like potency or tenacity. Fennec, again, being a great example, just wants as much offense as possible. Typically, she is not typically, she's always a special damage dealer, but typically when you take her against a character like Lord Vader, who can't even be crit in the first place, it makes the possibilities of her critting with her special damage incredibly low, or zero, again, if she's hitting Lord Vader when he doesn't have, like, I don't know, below 80% protection or whatever it is. So you can see here we've leveraged this really weird potency mod with an offense primary because Fennec doesn't care about the secondary set because she is already getting her offensive boost from these offense mods. And then in a really weird arrow, there's actually a speed set that has an offense primary. We're leveraging this because, again, we want the offense primary, while at the same time, a speed arrow without a speed primary or atrocious speed secondary doesn't have that much use to begin with at all. So again, leveraging kind of weird mods to get Fennec to the goal she needs to be at, because she really only cares about offense at the end of the day, with I guess a little bit of speed, but we can't get that from an offset. Han Solo, another weird one. This is one that I think not a lot of people use, but right now you can see without a crit chance set, his crit chance for his physical damage, which is what he uses, is actually already over 100%. And what makes it even better is once you start to dig into the rest of the Rebels kits, you actually get even more crit chance from other sources. Han Solo himself actually does have crit chance up on his special, but assuming your enemy has any number of dispels, that might not be reliable. But again, when we start to dig into Chewbacca's kit itself, and we look at Loyal Friend and Guard, he's actually getting an additional 25% crit chance from Chewbacca himself. And then when we go back, and I believe it's even in his unique, he gets another 20% critical chance. So my Han, without any critical chance secondaries, or rather prime sets, he is going to be getting 145% critical chance, meaning my secondaries, or my other mods that I have here, really should be focusing on trying to get as much offense as possible, because we already know that he's going to crit at least when he's able. Of course, we won't be able to crit characters who have crit immunity, but then any number of crit chance really doesn't help us all that much. So again, focusing very heavily on the offense and speed secondaries here to try to leverage as much as we can. Also, he doesn't really need potency that much because the one time he has a stun that actually matters is in the very beginning, and then Chewbacca typically has tenacity down. Tenacity also isn't all that important for him because on top of the fact that Chewie's giving him guard, it gives him crit chance, it also doesn't allow him to be crit, which kind of already makes him tanky in a way. So overall, just doesn't really need that secondary set and can start focusing on the he can focus on the secondary stats that come along with those other mods. Dark Trooper is really another great example. Very similar to Fennec in the sense that he's very rarely going to crit, so crit chance really doesn't do anything for him at all, because the one time when his basic actually can crit, he needs to have advantage. I guess you could make the argument that if you want his AoE to crit, then modding him for crit chance might be worth something. But again, when you look at Dark Trooper's kit as a whole, you don't know him as the shooter trooper. You know him as the punchy trooper, because not only does he use his basic more because it doesn't have cooldowns, but he's consistently called in to assist because Piet will mark him and then sometimes get a single, double, or even sometimes a triple assist if you have range there, and his unique kicks in as well. So again, overall, really just focusing on as much offense as possible. We really don't need to worry about having a defense set or a health set or a tenacity set. He just wants to hit as hard as he can. So again, leveraging, actually, this is such a weird mod, but I love it for Dark Trooper. Not even a speed secondary on this one. Health set that's not being utilized, no speed secondary, but 8% offense because it just hit that well. I guess that wasn't really meant to be a brag, but it kind of turned into one. Next up is going to be Terran Malicos. Terran Malicos is going to be pretty similar to Han Solo in the sense that he's already getting enough crit chance from his team that he really doesn't need any more added, and then a health or defense set really don't get him that far because it's really the rest of his team's job to protect him, particularly crew as well as Seer. When you look into his kit, you'll notice that he immediately gives 30% crit chance to his entire team. That does include himself. And I don't know if I want to, we'll dig into it really quickly here. Seer also, especially if you have the Omicron in GAC, is going to add quite a bit of crit chance when the enemy team takes their turns before you end up going. She adds 5% crit chance for every turn that your enemy takes before anyone on your team moves, and then another 10% if you are going to also have the Omicron. So when we pull out the calculator and we do the math, if we assume that the entire enemy team takes one turn, or let's say one of them does, and let's say one of them is a tank, you're still getting an extra 60% crit chance on top of the 30 that he's already getting, which puts him well over a healthy amount that you really don't need to mod him for it. So again, looking at his base crit chance, it's about 78%. You add 90% on top of that. He should be critting most of the time. Now, last and certainly not least is going to be Padawan Obi-Wan, and you will already probably realize when you look at his mods that I'm very much breaking my rule, and I will go into that. For most PvP instances, Padawan Obi-Wan really doesn't need crit chance or any extra survivability, and the reason why is because of his unique, where he gets 25% extra crit chance for each other Galactic Republic ally. More often than not, in 5v5, that's going to be 4, meaning he has 100% crit chance right out the gate before you even look at anything else, which again puts him at about 175. Even if you go down to 3v3, he's still over 100%. He's at like 125%. The reason why I have him at he has a crit chance for me, or a crit chance set for me, and why it might be important to you is if you are at the last tier of the current Naboo raid, there is a ridiculous amount of crit avoidance. And it can be mitigated, I will say this, it can be mitigated a little bit by having healing over time on Padawan Obi-Wan, as he can get up to 50% extra critical chance because of that. But when you go in and you look at the numbers for the Naboo raid, it's gross. It's right here, pull up the difficulty. If you're on that last tier where your characters are required to be R9, which a lot of people actually do have because of the assault battle, 140% critical chance the enemies have. And since Padawan Obi-Wan isn't a separatist, he actually doesn't get the 100% critical chance boost. So you don't necessarily need the extra crit chance to be able to hit it most of the time, but it's nice to even out the odds, especially when Qui-Gon Jinn can't necessarily give Padawan Obi-Wan advantage for every single turn that he takes, and we all have been there before when the droid strips off that advantage from Obi-Wan right before he's about to use his big AoE, which is really not ideal for multiple reasons, even not having to do with the critical chance. But overall, that is going to be the method of using broken sets on characters. Again, primarily going to be wanting to focus on support characters that just want to take as many turns when it comes to speed, and then focusing on offense when it comes to certain attackers that don't necessarily need to crit and or land very specific debuffs. I will say, please don't try to do this on tanks. Tanks very, very rarely are going to not benefit from a health or defense set, which that offset is almost always going to be for them. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this was helpful, and until next time, stay awesome.